Hello and welcome to the Car Care Nut channel. So folks, we have a 2008 Toyota Tacoma. Now this Tacoma was sent to me by a viewer for his daughter. He asked me to check it over, do a few maintenance items, and get it ready for his daughter who's going to college actually in my town. This truck is originally from out of state. This is a manual transmission Tacoma. They're a little rare and they're beautiful. This particular Tacoma actually is a Rust Belt Tacoma, and the frame is absolutely beautiful, which we're going to take a look at as we talk about this generation Tacoma a little bit and show you how a preserved frame in the Rust Belt looks like. But before we get started, if you're new to the channel, welcome. Consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some other videos if you are a returning subscriber. Thank you so much for watching another one of my videos, and without further ado, let's get right into it. Before we start and take a look underneath it, I'm going to show you the inside. Very nice interior, very clean. Everything is nice and tidy. This is a 2008. Let's look at the miles so you can get a reference. This has 108,000 miles, 497. He has a backup camera here, which is actually a pretty cool accessory. I wonder what kind of brand this is. This is a manual transmission, a beautiful manual transmission with a TRD shifter. It's actually an old school TRD shifter, pretty cool. You got the parking brake here. Pretty interesting to see these parking brakes. These are very old school for a Toyota. It is four-wheel drive. Very nice truck, very well kept. Headliner is clean, interior is very clean. You know this is a DIY mechanic because you got a cabin filter right there. He is actually a DIY mechanic, but he wanted me to service the car, get it ready for his daughter. One thing I noted about this truck, this is something perhaps will help you in the future. Do you see these signs, this rundown here? And then there was another one right here. See that stuff that's running down? This truck's been parked outside for a while. You see a little bit of mold growing there. This is gonna need a really good cleaning. When you look at the edges right here, you see it right there too. This is just gonna need a really good cleaning. I imagine this was a father-daughter car. The father probably has another car, and this is the daughter's car. She's gonna be driving it. Yes, kudos to daughters. Fathers out there, this is your responsibility. Manual transmission truck. I have mechanics that do not drive manual transmission because they never learned. And here is a young lady that is just going to college that knows how to drive a manual transmission. I actually put this as one of my life goals. I have two daughters. We're going to teach them how to drive manual transmission because it's a skill you never forget, just like riding a bicycle, I suppose. Having said that, let's go look underneath this Tacoma. Let's see what we see. Let's take a look underneath this Tacoma. Now, as we go through this video, I'm going to share with you some of their common problems. But the first thing always is the frame. I always tell you Toyota trucks, the frames and rust do not get along. This truck is a Virginia truck. They do have salt use, but there's something unique about this truck. Look at the frame. Let's take a quick look at the frame. I mean, I see nothing on this frame. Usually when you get to this area right here, when the C-channel opens, you have flakes, you have things falling off of it, yet this frame looks brand new. And no, this is not a Florida car for most of its life. It's been in Virginia for 2 years. Because if we come and look at the front shock from this angle, right here, if we look at the shock right here, look how rusty that is. This is Rustland symptoms. Same thing on the other side. If you look at the other side, same exact thing. Now, there's no issues with this strut. It's rusty, yes, it's an issue, but not as immediate. But I expect the frame to be exactly like that strut. It's not. The frame's been coated. It is potentially fluid film or something of the like. Works really good, and the owner continuously reapplied it, protected this frame. Didn't just spray it once and forget it. They kept looking after it. That's why this frame, that otherwise would have been completely rotten, looks perfectly fine. You look at the control arm here, this was not sprayed. You see the rust over it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, these control arms typically do not rot unless you get really, really bad, but these are not bad. Now let's talk about some of the other issues with these Tacomas. You got the ADD right here for the front differential. This is notorious for these. You don't use your four-wheel drive in 10 years, and then all of a sudden you decide to activate it, this guy jams up. If that happens to you, give it a little tap here as you're activating it. It's really hard. You gotta have someone in the car going back and forth as you tap. Sometimes you can free it up like that, but it'll never work right. So the best thing is activate it always. Let's talk about the front. Now, for some reason, even though this is very similar to a 4Runner, in 4Runner land, front CV boots are notorious. They will always be torn and leaking, and you're replacing them. On the Tacomas, they're not as bad. Yes, they will tear eventually, but not as bad. I mean, look at these. These are perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with them. No leaks, no tears. These are original. They look beautiful. There's nothing wrong with them. Now, speaking on this area, since we are here, unlike the 4Runner, the CV boots do not leak, but just like the 4Runner, the calipers, they're notorious disease, folks. And this is the thing with Toyota trucks. They have been using this design caliper for so long, and the series of events is the pins that hold the pads in, they seize, and then they seizes the caliper, and that's it. If you own one of these and you live in the Rust Belt, every year take them apart, clean everything, put them back. You're actually going to get a lot longer life out of these calipers because they're a little pricey. Make sure when you look up OEM parts on these, you put 8.4 at the end of the OEM part if there's not 8.4 already, because that gets you the reman part, which is really good, and it's actually comparable price-wise to aftermarket, and they're really good. Moving on in the common problems train, if you would. Now, something with this engine, this is the old 1GR, the one with the platinum plugs that you're going to replace these plugs every 30,000. Very important that you do. I've seen people go 120 and you pull the plugs, they're just destroyed, they're done. And your gas mileage suffers and the truck hesitates. 30,000 miles on these, unless you switch to iridium plugs, that's up to you. But something that's very common with this engine, that is kind of a problem, and this one actually has it. Not as bad. If you're the owner watching this, do not panic. We've already had this conversation at this point. But if we look up from here, so it's really hard to see, but I'm going to try my best to show you. If you look just underneath the exhaust manifold, right there, see that little crust? Now, what that is this is something what I call the phenomenon with the GR engines. If you take the cylinder head off, there's an area where it's almost like a coolant jet. And the coolant being acidic, if the coolant's not replaced frequently, it becomes acidic, it starts attacking that area of the gasket from the inside. And then rust and salt on the road attacks the head gasket, which is metal, on the outside. And it creates that perfect channel that every time you rev the truck up, you see a drop pass. But eventually, now this is what this happened, probably a few drops escape and that's it. We don't have a big problem. This is not a place. If yours looks like this, leave it alone, keep an eye on it. When it gets to a point where you have coolant all over the place, like you look here in this area by the oil pan and you see coolant here, that's when it gets bad where you need to replace this head gasket. But if it's just a little smidge, don't worry about it, but know about it, keep an eye on it. Now, something else with these, this one is a beautiful manual transmission. I don't remember the last time I did anything to a manual transmission on these, apart from clutch, the regular maintenance stuff. I consider clutch maintenance. But really, they're bulletproof. They don't have any issues. Very similar to the automatic transmission. They don't really have issues. You take care of the fluid, it'll take care of you. Life is good. With these, however, just like the FJs, if you don't replace the automatic transmission fluid on time, at some point you're going to develop a torque converter shudder. That's the only downside. So replace the fluid on those every 60,000, you won't have issues. Going back in the truck, the drive shaft, and Tacomas are notorious for vibration from the drive shaft. U-joints, so much that Toyota actually had a campaign to replace the U-joints. The way you want to check the U-joints on these is grab the shaft from here, grab the other side, and then twist opposite direction. If you don't feel any movement up and down, in and out, we're good. That's it. Let's try this joint right here. You're gonna grab the one side, grab the shaft, move it. Not move the whole thing. If you move the whole thing, you'll hear noise. But you're trying to see if this U-joint has any play in between it. We're gonna go the same here. We're gonna hold the outside and then twist. I don't feel anything. Now, something notorious, common mistake. When people replace the U-joints on these trucks, and I see this all the time, people are not familiar with Toyotas and replacing U-joints. You have to phase the U-joints. Very common mistakes. Some old mechanics will call it an amateur mistake, but mistakes happen, and they will cause a lot of vibration immediately after you replace the drive shaft. Here's what I mean by that. See, let's bring the camera this way and I'll show you the phase of these U-joints. Do you see how this part of the U-joint is here? This holder of the U-joint is here? Just look at it from far away and now follow my hand. We get to the next one. Do you see how it's in the same position? And then we're going to follow it to the next one. Do you see how it's in the same position? If you have a drive shaft that this is like this, and then you move here, and you're on the other side, we have problems. You did not phase these correctly. And this is a common mistake. You see this, they start vibrating, and we have problems. Always phase your U-joints on these because they're so sensitive to this. It is unbelievable how much vibration there will be. Then we move over to the very back of this truck. And the rear end, for the most part, they're really trouble-free. They don't have a lot of issues. But one thing, and it's actually turned into a recall, the leaf springs, they're notorious to break. And the way for you to know, just by looking at any Tacoma, if you have the updated version or the old version, which you do not want to keep in the truck, you have 3 holders here. Some of the old designs had 2. If you have 2, you have old design. If you have 3, we're good. This is, of course, the new one. This has a recall, but even some people did not get the recall done. Some cars or trucks were not affected by the recall. This is something you really need to watch for, because when these breaks, we have bad problems. I've seen them break and slide and hit the tire. I've seen them break and the truck just falls. Could be a safety issue. That's why there's a safety recall on the ones that are affected, but even the newer ones, check them. Otherwise, this particular Tacoma is in beautiful shape. But I see one, and I actually just noticed it. For some reason, Toyota decided to, on some of them, put a limited slip differential. But the problem is, they did not put any identification anywhere, except this little sticker. It is such a bad idea, because this sticker will fall off one day, and then the only way for you to find out is to put the non-LSD fluid here, and it'll start chattering, or unless you know that this is LSD from the way it drives. Not a greatest idea. So once you see this on your differential in a Tacoma, and you sell the truck, notify the next owner, hey, the rear differential is LSD, so they know. This is one of some of the quirks, if you would, with the Tacoma, is this one. If you dig deep into the Toyota system and look at the information, you're gonna find it somewhere that it breaks it down, but it's not very clear, and this is one of the quirks of the Tacoma. So otherwise, they don't have that many problems, and that's why the Tacoma is such a beloved truck. There's just not much going on here. You look at some other trucks, there's all kinds of overcomplication. There's just not much going on here. Very simple engine. Anybody can work on this engine. Very simple transmission. Very simple transfer case. This motor is not as common to go out as some other models, but it's still possible. Again, you don't use it, it's going to have problems. It's as simple as that. Yes, and this is still old school. You got to take the whole transfer case just to replace this guy. Some guys have taken this, and I don't recommend it because you could really ruin a very expensive motor. Do it right if you're going to do it, or the right way to do it really is never to do it by activating a four-wheel drive. But otherwise, these are very simple trucks to work on, to own. They just run and run and run, and really not much happens to them. You'll go through an alternator or two. You maybe will go through one starter or two, maybe. Not as common. Alternators are a little bit more common. On the early ones, you get into 05, 06, and 07s, you'll have some idlers that sing in the front. Very simple to replace, very simple to diagnose. You'll go through a water pump or two, but if you find one that looks like this today, not a rusty frame that has been coated, or it's not a rust belt truck, this is a good truck to buy, because even when that head gasket becomes bad, it is not a bad job, because you've driven this truck for 15 years, and that's the only thing you had to do. You had to do a head gasket, and that's it. And the four-cylinder model is exactly the same. You'll put 10 valve cover gaskets on this four-cylinder model, and that's it. Nothing really happens with them. They really run forever, and this is why, because they're simple. So when you go buy one, don't go buy the one that has all the problems. Buy one like this. Buy one that you don't see any of these red flags, especially the frame. Please do not buy one with a bad frame, because that's when the good truck turns into a really bad one. And keep up the maintenance when you buy it, especially that 30,000 mile plug. See, a lot of people skip on that. And one more thing on the Tacoma that is a little odd. Not the early years, but the later years. For some reason, the condenser is very expensive OEM. I mean, ridiculous expensive OEM. Please do not fall for that. There is nothing special about this condenser. For some reason, it is very expensive. Toyota's come up with an economy line that is a lot cheaper. Don't overpay for this condenser. There's nothing special about it. Go buy a Denso one, go buy an aftermarket one. A condenser is, for lack of a better word, is just a fancy radiator. We don't need to pay a small fortune for this. This is one of those cases where I'll tell you, do not overpay for the original, because you can find a Denso which is exactly the same for a quarter of the price. For some reason, Tacoma has an expensive original condenser. Thought I'd let you know, because this is a common one that I see. So there you have it, folks. If you take care of your frame in the rust belt, you're not going to have issues, just like this one. You saw the control arms, they have a little bit of rust, surface rust, not an issue. The control arms rarely have issues with these, but the frame will rot, this truck will break. Yes, there was recall on top of recall, but this goes to show, if you really take care of this frame from day one, it's going to look brand new, which it does on this one. Folks, this is a rust belt car. Let me just remind you of that. I hope this video was helpful, informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some other videos. And until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.